Today we'll be talking to Scott Smith. He is a registered nurse and nurse educator with T.J. Sampson Community and Outreach Center here in Glasgow. First of all, Scott, can you tell us what obesity is?
Well, I guess obesity simply defined is just having too much body fat. You know, our bodies are made up of water, protein, carbohydrates, vitamins, and minerals, and fat as well. You need to have a certain amount of it, but there are definitions that once you exceed those limits, it's classified as obesity.
At what point do you think that it becomes obesity as far as a definition?
Well, there's a couple of simple parameters you can look at. You can calculate a body mass index, which can give you a general idea. One even simpler than that is just a waistline measurement. And for females, a waistline over 35 inches gets you a classification of obesity, and in males, over 40 inches.
Scott, what effects has the epidemic of obesity had on the American population?
Well, obesity was recently recognized now officially as a risk factor in heart disease. And so, you know, obesity can also lead to other problems like high blood pressure. It can be a factor in developing type 2 diabetes. It can lead to atherosclerosis or a hardening of the arteries. And obesity can also cause other problems. It is known to be a contributing factor in gallstones, development of gallstones. And it can also make degenerative joint disease a little bit worse because you're carrying more weight around, and you know that's tougher on the joints if you have the joint disease already there.
Scott, what are some of the reasons you think have caused obesity rates to be so high in Kentucky?
Well, I think it goes back to our culture somewhat. We like our fried foods here in Kentucky.
Definitely.
Of course, I know I was raised on that. Love that fried pork chop, sausage, bacon, a lot of fatty foods. You know, we have a history of eating that here. You know, years ago when we were basically most of the people were engaged in farming of some type, you know, for a living. You know, we were outdoors a lot, worked a lot harder physically. And, you know, we ate those things, and it didn't affect us as badly as it does today. We've got a more sedentary lifestyle here in Kentucky than we used to have. And we continue to eat those fatty foods, the fried foods. And so, you know, I think that's why we see more obesity now than we used to.
What about our children? What are some of the things you think that lead to such high obesity rates in our children right now?
Well, again, it goes back to a more sedentary lifestyle. In the 70s, or I should say from the 1970s, early 1970s, up until the early 2000s, we saw a almost fourfold increase in obesity rates in children. You know, think about it in the 1970s. What did kids do in those days? Did they sit in front of the TV a whole lot? No. Did they play video games?
No, not as much.
No. You know, they were outside playing for the most part. Today, you know, they're sitting on the couch, sitting in front of a, you know, computer, sitting in front of a video game. And we have more fast foods available today as well. Of course, that's a big contributing factor to the problem.
Some of the steps that are needed to begin to break the cycle of obesity in Kentucky?
Well, to affect a change in behavior, you've got to have the desire for a change. And so what we've got to try to do is create that desire for change in people. And about the best way we can do that is just to educate them to the problems that obesity can cause. You know, do you want to develop heart disease in your 40s? Do you want to develop diabetes in, you know, middle age? Obesity can contribute to having those problems at an earlier age than you normally would. So we've got to try to educate the public about healthy lifestyles, why you want to avoid obesity.
Scott, what do we need to be teaching our children to help the next generation of Kentuckians not to be an obese population?
Well, going back to physical activity, we've got to try to get our kids involved in more outdoor activities, more playtime, less time in front of the TV and playing video games. Also, at an early age, we've got to try to introduce healthier eating habits, introduce a broader variety of foods at an earlier age, more fruits and vegetables, whole grain foods, low fat foods. It's easy to, especially when you're in a hurry, just give them some chips or a Twinkie or whatever, just to satisfy them, fill their belly. Well, it takes a little effort really these days to have healthier kids, and preparing healthier foods, offering that to them. Another thing, try to limit their eating in front of the TV, because that can lead to overeating. You don't realize how much you're eating when you're sitting there watching SpongeBob or whatever it is that you're watching. And before you know it, you've eaten a whole bag of Cheetos. So try to limit eating in front of the TV too would be a good thing.
So really some of the major things that we need to change are the behaviors that we have and the things that we eat and the amount of exercise we get. Would you feel that that's a pretty good summation of what we need to do?
I think you summed it up quite well.
All right.
Yeah.
Well, we appreciate your time today, Scott, and we thank you very much for the information that you've provided to us.
Hopefully we can realize from the following interview that obesity is a serious problem that we as a state and a nation are going to have to seriously deal with now rather than later. If we fail to deal with the epidemic of obesity now, our children and grandchildren will be suffering the consequences for generations to come. First, we must realize that we didn't get to this point overnight. To illustrate this, we will look at an obesity trend study that was done by the Center for Disease Control. Every year, the CDC collects information from local health departments. The data showed in these maps were collected through the CDC's Behavioral Risk Factor Surveillance System. Each year, state health departments use standard procedures to collect data through a series of telephone interviews with U.S. adults. In 1990, among the states participating in the Behavioral Risk Factor Surveillance System, 10 states had a prevalence of obesity less than 10%, and no states had prevalence equal to or greater than 15%. By 1999, no state had prevalence less than 10%. 18 states had a prevalence of obesity between 20 and 24%, and no state had prevalence equal to or greater than 25%. In 2008, only one state, Colorado, had a prevalence of obesity less than 20%. 32 states had a prevalence equal to or greater than 25%. 6 of these states, Alabama, Mississippi, Oklahoma, South Carolina, Tennessee, and West Virginia, had a prevalence of obesity equal to or greater than 30%. These maps that we are about to see cover the years from 1985 to 2008. As we watch these maps, pay close attention to how the trend increases in the areas of the country most affected. Also pay close attention to the state of Kentucky and think to yourself how our lifestyles have changed over the past 20 years to get us to the point we are at now with the epidemic of obesity.